So I've been around my fair share. Certainly not everywhere, but more than most my age. And I've yet to find a cure for the restlessness that keeps me wandering, or a nice little key to unlock a door where happiness just washes over me. I've certainly found cures for restlessness and bits of happiness along my travels, my journeys, but never like a concrete recipe for those things happening. There's this trend going on TikTok of the glorification of the solo traveler, and the algorithm has me pinned quite well because I get those little 7-second reels all the time, and they are tempting, and I've been there and I've loved it. But I feel like there's more to that story than a nice little 7-second snippet can tell. So here's that story, from me at least.
It was April of 2019. I had lived in Istanbul, Turkey for about 5 months at the time, and I spent most of that wandering around, broke and a bit lonely. I had seen, though, these islands out in the Marmara Sea, and they had been calling me. And eventually I finally found the ferry and made it out there, and walking around this one island, Hey Bildialda, that you're seeing now, became one of the most beautiful core memories of my life. I listened to the 1975's I Like It When You Sleep, For You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It for the first time, and it's now one of my favorite records. I think because I listened to it while walking around this beautiful place. It's a weird thing, isn't it? The album is certainly no work of musical genius, but because I listened to it walking around this one place, and because it so perfectly met the emotions from a lost love, and also the beautiful scenery and sense of adventure and solace of walking around alone, it kind of wedged itself into my mind. And whenever I go back to that album, it brings me back to this beautiful little place. A sorrowful memory turned beautiful.
Traveling alone can be so liberating and freeing, but I've spent a fair share of nights in a Walmart tent, really unhappy with my life. And also hotels, Motel 6s around the world, and also apartments in Turkey, where I have not been physically able to enjoy the beauty that surrounds me due to life. And that's the nuance that can't be conveyed in the 7-second TikTok video with an overdub of whatever the current trending song is. Because just as I've been lonely and tense in hotel rooms and apartments, I've also been filled with wonder so frequently and so often with the places that I go, whether it be DC or Istanbul or Chicago or Seattle or the Redwoods or Crater Lake or Maine, the fjords in Maine, or even just Gunnersville, Alabama, right down the road. So there's certainly a whole story to tell, and I've been wanting to tell this story of a few of my travels for the longest time. I've filmed videos and bits that I've tried to tell stories about my trip down the West Coast, my trip up the East Coast, and also a bit to Turkey, but they've never felt right as whole stories. So here is me trying to tell that story. So we've got probably an hour and a half to where I'm planning on camping. Apparently the sites are first come, first serve. It's in the middle of nowhere. I'm not an experienced camper. I am not by any means that kind of outdoorsy, a different kind of outdoorsy. Don't have firewood or anything, just have a tent. Gotta be on it. So it should be fun. I'm planning on writing a few letters, doing that thing, and into a tunnel. That was pretty fun.
Where I ended up staying, by the way, was in a national forest campground, probably about an hour and a half from Great Smoky Mountain National Park. A 20-minute drive down a dirt road in a valley in North Carolina at about 10 p.m. led me to setting up a tent for the first time in over a decade, and then being all sweet and writing love letters to a love now long gone. Little sad, maybe? I don't know. You tell me. Worth the experience, though. Beyond the sea, 1,000 lights glimmer. Every breath a joy, every sigh a pain. If you were here, your eyes would have something beautiful to say. My verse might be a little more glee. Regrettably, the squeaking dock is the only song that lulls me. Okay, you can say that that's pretty sad. I eventually ended up on this beach in Cape Cod. After making my way through DC and meeting a friend from Turkey, and then through Jersey City and into New York City, even though there were some pretty sketchy COVID laws at the time, I needed to go to New York because I wanted to buy a new camera. And I look pretty happy about it, don't I? It still looks like shit because I'm recording at dusk with a lens that's an f4 aperture. Still seem pretty happy about it though, don't I? I eventually decided to camp. And that seems pretty magical, doesn't it? Well, this was one of those really sucky nights in a tent. Not just because it was windy and sandy, but because it was lonely. Another one of those objectively beautiful times that I would never take back. A core memory, if you will. Yet, it was still a little miserable. Though, even then, I still understood that it was beautiful. So I camped out on the beach in Cape Cod, and I was a little worried last night that it might not have been a good idea, but this morning, I'm okay with that. I need to get the tent packed up because this is a place where I'm not really sure you're supposed to camp. It's just like it's in the national seashore or whatever, but it's just, there's a big parking lot up there. So I'm gonna pack the tent up, and you may have noticed a significant increase in quality. That's because when I was in New York, I bought a new camera, Fuji X-T4. Pretty mad. Yeah. Cape Cod's not bad. A little crowded in the day. A little crowded. Let's get going to Maine. So I continued on my merry way through Cape Cod and into Maine, where eventually I wrote some poetry that honestly I'm really not ready to share with you guys. I couldn't even listen to all of it. The joys of solo traveling. I did get a cool shot of my car, though. It doesn't look like that anymore after 2 coasts, about 3 years, and almost 60,000 miles now. This just got this weird, like, tick around the transmission. And, like, I'm not a mechanic, and also, like, I don't want to spend money on it. And I love the car, but the joys of used car ownership. Oh yeah, and I also stopped by this place in Camden, Maine, and bought a wedding ring, but that went well. Anyways, let's get back to the story.
There's an odd sorrow, in my experience, at least with a solo trip. There's a hope that I always have of, like, discovering something new about myself, of, like, finding some, like, key thing to, like, change my mood and, like, dramatically alter the course of my life to some new wonder. And I think those things have happened to me, but it's rarely ever like a snap thing. It's a long course that I can look back over my life and see me walking on Heybeliada in Istanbul and see how the thoughts and the music I listened to, and that whole experience guided me towards, hey, where I am today. I can think back to driving up the East Coast through DC and then up into Cape Cod and then up into Maine and dealing with a relationship I was in at the moment, and seeing how all the things that I thought and did then led me to where I am now. I can think of the trip to Seattle and then all the way down to San Diego and back, and how I was getting over the relationship that I ended the summer before, and how being out there alone really informed how I think of life today. So absolutely, go on that trip. Go see the world. But don't be too upset when it's not as idyllic as it might appear on the Instagram.
Here I am in the Moore Campground, in a Pacific enclave of Olympic National Park, in Washington, with a much better camera and some still pretty bad audio. Couldn't be bothered for this take. But I'm going to tell you a story anyways. Finally made it to the West Coast. Lovely. Never seen the Pacific Ocean in America, and I'm looking forward to seeing it a lot more the next week until I gotta go back home. This trip was not too dissimilar than all my others, in that it started off with a question at the beginning. What did I want to do? I'd been going to school for history and was about to graduate in a year, and was wanting to determine my next course of action. I felt as if I wanted to be a professor, so obviously further education was on my mind. A thought came into my head whether I might enjoy getting a degree in comparative religions, and the University of Washington in Seattle offered a course that seemed intriguing. So, ever the one to be encouraged by a whim, I decided to just make that my vacation. And hey, Seattle's at the northwest. I got an uncle in San Diego, and that was the impetus for this trip. My second alternative was to maybe go back to Istanbul and get a degree there in history. I didn't know, and I didn't finally realize what I wanted to do until I was about 4 hours away from home, driving on Highway 72 across the Mississippi, when it just occurred to me, as I asked myself that question, what do I want to do? And it was so obvious that Istanbul was calling me at that time. The only old things left in these woods are crooked. So let us be young, let us be love, foster and grow, beauty, wisdom, and strength. All to find ourselves chipped away, sacrificed to serrated teeth, for an honesty and humble love of peace, judged too straight for the world. So chopped down, used as timber for another. So toppled down, used as kindling for yet another. Oh yeah, I got much better at poetry in the year between these trips. Or maybe I just wasn't in love. It does weird things to you. It still sounds pretty idyllic, I hear you say. Where's the point of this video that you're trying to get across? Well, here it is. As I was driving through Washington, a brother of a friend saw an Instagram story I posted and said, "Hey, if you're driving through Portland, I'm going to buy you a drink and I'll let you stay at my house." And that became the best part of this trip, the human connection. I saw undoubtedly gorgeous places like Crater Lake right here that I'd always wanted to see since I was a kid, and saw it in a textbook and just thought it was the craziest, most beautiful, otherworldly thing I wanted ever. And also, I had a really strong connection to the redwoods in Northern California. Just beautiful things, which I'll show you a bit more poetry later. But it was that moment in Portland, with the brother of a friend who had the gall to text me over Instagram and say, "Hey, I've never really even met you, but come be a friend." So my advice for traveling alone is never shy away from an opportunity to make a new friend. And I made the conscious decision before I left for this trip to do that thing, because I'd noticed that my trips before, the loneliness always crept in and kind of ruined the rest of it. Even just that one night in Portland made the rest of the lonely nights a bit less lonely and a bit more meaningful. Here's that little bit from the Redwoods, by the way. Once again, I had gotten a lot better at poetry in the years since the last trip. So I'm out here in the Redwoods, and it is just divine. I've always wanted to see the Redwoods, and here we are. I mean, huge things always fascinate me. I love cathedrals, and being somewhere like this, cathedrals make a lot more sense, you know? This is what they were going for. This is literally it. This is the thing that they were all trying to emulate. And here it is. Wow. Better than anyone ever could, if you ask me. I walked up a trail a little bit ago that was kind of right along the edge of where the redwoods were once logged, and it hit me. It affected me. I don't know how you can look at something like that. It's been alive for 1,000 years and just cut it. I mean, oh my goodness. There's a whole atrium inside of it. Yeah, it's still alive. Wow. Wow. So I wrote a thing. You know, it brought a little tear to my eye. First of all, just the grandeur of it. And second of all, just kind of the tragicness of chopping something like this down. You can't tell me this was worth strip malls and urban sprawl. Thousands of years of nature's handiwork, gone on the whim of a loose century. These few surviving bastions have stories to tell. You reap what you sow, eventually. If you would stop and look and touch and dream of anything but productivity, maybe you'd see the beauty in that tree. Maybe you'd see the beauty in me. A vow in everything. If you just looked at everything as maybe just a little bit holy, the world might be a little bit better. Anyways. Philosophy time over. All this just to say, for me, the pros outweigh the cons, but also it's a good bit of advice to be warned of the cons, and also prepare for them, so you can use them to learn something, maybe a little bit more about yourself, maybe a little bit more about the world, maybe a little bit more about humanity.
By all means, please go on your trip. With wisdom, it will inform so much. But know that the answers that an experience like this gives are kind of cryptic and nuanced, and usually don't truly show themselves until a good bit of hindsight is offered. That is at least my experience. Maybe the TikTokers have a different experience, but oftentimes when I'm out in the middle of who knows where, I am frequently wanting a home.
I would wander the world to find a hope I'd heard was divine. But after all my searching, I'm still the same man. Cold heart can't be warmed by the sea. But between you and me, closed eyes still can't see. On my way to a perfection, I'm changing into more than a reflection. A shroud of fog clears on an empty question. How could I know what's in your heart if I've already reserved all the space in mine?
And maybe the TikTokers have a different experience, but most of the time when I'm off wandering, I am, at least subconsciously, looking for a home. And when I'm home, I am always restless for the next thing to see. Which maybe means I just haven't found my home yet. It may just mean I'm always going to be wandering. Either way, I don't ever see a world where I'm not seeing beautiful things and always searching for the next beautiful thing. So, my 2 cents.